and welcome to another episode of Spotlight Sessions. My name's Ilan Fisher. I'm the host of the series, and today I'm really excited to be having a conversation with Chris Beesley, who's the CEO of Community Living Ontario. How's it going, Chris?
Good morning. Doing really well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Afternoon where I'm at, but good morning too. Yeah, I see outside in Toronto, it's deep in the snow. So, Chris, I'd love to know a little bit about your background and yourself and your career. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Sure. Thanks, Elon. So my name is Chris Beesley, as you said. I live in Toronto, Canada, where I think it's a high of -7 degrees Celsius today. So feel sorry for us if you're warmer than that. I married to my wife for over 30 years. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old son who happens to have an intellectual disability as well as autism. My background was in business management, so I have a degree in business management and ran my own business for quite a number of years, and also started volunteering with our local community living organization that supports people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and ended up on their board of directors, and just loved what the organization stood for, loved the work they did, to the point where I felt like my volunteer work was kind of what got me out of bed in the morning, and my work that paid the bills just was kind of my day job. And so I went back to school, to university for a while, part-time, just to get some more education around not-for-profit management. And then in 2010, got a job as the executive director of an adult literacy network in the Toronto area, and really enjoyed that. And a few years later, the role for CEO at Community Living Ontario came up, and threw my hat in the ring, and have been here since 2013.
Wow, an amazing story, and I'm really always happy to hear of people, who are able to work in their passion. It's very rare, and I think something that people, especially now, are turning round to. So, Chris, what does the day-to-day work look like in Community Living Ontario? What are some of the services that you offer? Tell me a little bit about what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. So community living was founded in Ontario a little over 70 years ago, and locally, and I guess organizations in various towns and cities across Ontario realized that there was a role for a provincial voice, and so that's when Community Living Ontario was founded in 1953. So our work is really around working with our 100 plus local associations who support families and people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as working with families, with people who have disabilities, and advocating with them and on their behalf to make a more inclusive world, I guess, if not to put too fine a point on it, but that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to belong, to be included, I guess we describe it as not just to be seen in the community, and not even to be able to participate, but to actively contribute to one's own community in a way where everyone's gifts are acknowledged and valued, and to be together on that basis. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the work that we do. So it's about giving people opportunities. I mean, our tagline is inspiring possibilities. And so it's providing, we have a program where we work with high school students to connect them to people in their community who have a shared interest, or an interest that the student might like to explore, that might lead to some social connections, might lead to some volunteerism, might lead to a job, and just to help people, support them to connect to people and places in their community that interest them. We do advocacy work with the government, trying to promote inclusive education, supported employment, affordable housing, and again that ultimately for that belonging piece that we're working towards.
I love that, and especially the initiative you described with the high school students. This is something that I've interviewed a lot of people, and every time this is one of the things that they're most passionate about. It's about really having those real world connections. And once you have those real world connections, you're really, taking down a lot of the barriers and a lot of the preconceived notions of what it is to have a disability and what it is to work with a disability. So that's
Absolutely.
really incredible. And I'd love to hear a little bit more if you want to explain more about what kind of advocacy efforts you're putting in with the government or in the state level. That would be really interesting to hear more about.
Sure. So again, it's working with our various stakeholders, and we have a council that's comprised entirely of people who have an intellectual disability. It's an elected board that people run for the positions from across the province, and we work closely with them and with our board of directors in setting the priorities and setting the direction of the organization, and to really amplify the voice of the people we support and work with. And so they're really concerned about some of the things I mentioned. Poverty is a huge one. We know that in Ontario 75% of people who have intellectual disabilities aren't employed, and yet so many do want to be employed. And so we're part of a national project that called Ready, Willing, and Able, that really tries to connects with employers or potential employers and talks about how people are, as the program says, ready, willing, and able to work, and how many people, are great at their jobs. How we've proven over the last 6 or 7 years that they have better attendance records, they have better motivation, they're equal to or better in productivity. That with the right opportunities and the right support, that people with intellectual disabilities can be successful. And so to connect with employers on that basis, and then connect them with our local associations who have that talent pool, and put the two together. And so we're pretty proud of that. We have a whole youth initiative that connects people both with and without disabilities in their local communities to come up with or come together and look at ways that they can promote inclusion in their own communities, whether it's on a social basis, as I said, employment, recreation, again, that's that belonging piece. And it's incredible how, the youth come together. I guess it's kind of the idea of get them when they're young, because when people are exposed to the idea of what community means, of what inclusion means, of what belonging means, then it's a natural human state to want to connect to each other and belong with each other. And so if you reinforce that when people are young, it just, why would we think or do anything else? And so to see teenagers come together and have those conversations and be with each other on that basis, and then go out into their communities and say, hey, what are you doing to create belonging in your community, and how can we connect people together? And it's pretty cool. So pretty proud of that as well. And we also do all the boring government stuff, where we're having meetings with government all the time, and we're talking about the need for, again, income benefits and income supports, and personal support, so that people can access their community on their terms, on the basis of the kind of supports they need. Housing, again, a big one, that people should be able to live where they want to live, with whom they want to live. So again, just like you and I, so we're pretty busy.
I absolutely love that answer. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, and actually touched me quite personally, was when you said, get them while they're young. And, I've been in the accessibility space, working with people with disabilities for something like 2 years. But at my age of 27, I haven't had that prior to this job. I haven't had a lot of encounters with people with disabilities. And I realized how I had to unlearn so many things that probably would have, not come into my psyche had I had those encounters earlier. So I just want to thank you for doing that important work. And not even that it should be important or overstated, it just should be natural, because it should touch absolutely everybody. And Chris, you're touched by accessibility and disability on a personal and professional level. What does accessibility mean to you? What's your kind of definition of accessibility? And I really like asking this question, because absolutely everybody has a different take and a different view, because it is such a broad topic.
Sure, absolutely. I think accessibility or making things accessible, I think is about making both people and resources available to everyone. And if we can do that, then that to me is kind of the building block of communication, of understanding, and community. So it's if you don't have if things aren't accessible, if people aren't accessible to each other, if the resources that people need aren't accessible, they're not made available on an equal basis or on an equitable basis, then you lack that sense of cohesiveness, of bringing together, of that, as I said, of that sort of conversation, communication, ultimately the understanding that creates spaces for community.
Amazing, and a really strong answer. And really, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, if you had a message to the business community, because you also came from the business community, about how to increase accessibility or how to cater specifically to your community, what would that be?
Pretty simple. We're all better when we're together, and I think and that's on in every way, shape, and form. And we've really taken a hard look at the diversity space and how it impacts people who have intellectual disabilities. And so the idea that a person doesn't just identify as having disability. In fact, it's probably the lesser part of how they think of themselves as a person. And so as you think about yourself and describe yourself, it's where you live, it's how you live, it's ethno-cultural, religious, socioeconomic, however you describe yourself. And so people with disabilities are part of humanity and describe themselves in similar ways. And so if we think of ourselves as together, in this together, in life together, then if you embrace that idea, and again, that comes with the accessible part, right? If we can make ourselves accessible to each other to facilitate that kind of communication and conversation, ultimately we all win. Like that's the ultimate win-win scenario, and that's what I mean by when I say we're all better when we're together.
And I love that message, and I think that's a beautiful also closing message, is the fact that we're all people first. People can identify in so many ways, and disability is just one facet of that personality, and definitely does not have to define a person.
Exactly.
Chris, I wanted to thank you so much for being on the show, and we really are very grateful to support you, and thank you very much for being so articulate and sharing, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks, Ilan.
All right, cheers.